Hi, Rosina.
Hi.
Hi. So, could you tell us what made you want to be an actor?
I, uh, I think I was 8 years old, and I was in this Camp Marymount, and and I was in this play. It was called The Birthday of the Infanta. It was by Oscar Wilde, and I was the Infanta, and I had a servant, and I said to the servant, I would be alone. And of course, I was dressed in this long, wonderful, flowing dress. I remember it was green, Kelly green with gold trimmings. I mean, the servant had to listen to me, and I was the boss. What a wonderful feeling to be on stage, to be somebody else. They listen to you. You are taking total control. That's not me in real life. God knows. In real life, not so much now, but then, and for most of my life, I was really pretty shy. So it gave me a magnificent sense of power. What a wonderful profession. Little did I know then what I know now.
What was your training as an actor, and what is your process for developing a character?
Well, my initial training was at Carnegie Mellon, 4 years of a wonderful university. I learned how to speak well. I learned how to project my voice. I did scenes, really, and for the first time, I really began to realize the discipline that it took to be an actor. So I'm very grateful for that initial training, tremendously important. But then I came to New York, and I realized that I needed more. I needed more internal work, and so I started to study with Lee Strasberg. And difficult as that man was, he really was a wonderful teacher, because he could look at a class of 20 students and know what each one was thinking or doing, and where they were phony and where they were real. And I really enjoyed and learned from my classes with him. And then all through my life, I've taken classes or been in workshops. You never can stop. How often do you get an acting job? You don't get an acting job very often, At least, there are a few stars who get work all the time, but most of us don't. But we have to keep working. We have to keep using our instruments. So it takes classes. That's what it's all about. And it also makes you much happier when you're doing work all the time. It really does. My process. Well, I read the play 10, 20 times. And sometimes the feelings that I first have about her change entirely by the 20th time I read the play. But having said that, I allow myself to change in rehearsal. I mean, one attitude, another attitude, see what works with my partner, see what works for the scene. So it's constant change until you find it. And when you find it, you have to hone it and love it and go with it and make it fresh every night. You put on a fresh dress and go out on stage.
After Carnegie Mellon, take us through that.
Okay. After I graduated, my parents and I, it was kind of a graduation gift. And also, it's something that they wanted to do very much. We traveled to the new state of Israel. And that was fascinating. But of course, I wanted to see whether there was any theater there. And indeed, I visited the Chamber Theater and saw some of their work. And when I came back to New York, one day I got a call from an actor-artist friend whom I'd met on an audition, and he said, there is a man from Israel who's in the Chamber Theater there, and since you've just come back, he'd like to meet you. It would make him feel more at home here. So it was at that point that I met a man whose name was Patya, Gabriel Dagan, who was a very good writer, and mainly a writer. And a few days after that, he called me and said, a friend of mine from the Comedy Theater is here, a young actor, and it would be interesting for you to meet him. And so I put on my little black dress, which made me look thinner than anything else, and that was important at the time, because I was, a little plump, but plump everywhere, so a well-proportioned plumpy. And so put on my little black dress, and we decided to meet at Carnegie Hall, so I stood against the wall in Carnegie Hall, and waited, and shortly after that, it was in the afternoon, Patya and this young man, a tall man with dark brown curly hair and brilliant blue eyes, came to, they saw me and came to me, and we started walking, and Patya spoke English, of course with an accent, that's nothing. This man, whose name was Avraham, later known as Av, but Avraham, started walking with me, and in very, 3-word sentences said, "What do you do?" And I said, "I'm an actress." He said, "You're too fat to be an actress," straight, without any problems. And I said, "Well, I just came back from Ann Arbor Drama Festival, where I played the leading role in Jane Bowles' drama In the Summer House with Mildred Dunnock, Logan Ramsey, Ann Jackson." And we continued talking. We had drinks together, and the next day he called me and I said, "Well, would you like to do a scene together?" I asked him, "Would you like to do a scene?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "But I have to find a scene with very few words because, you know, eventually it'll be all right, but right now you have difficulty with the English language. And he said, yes. He was very honest, very straight, with a great sense of humor, but very straight. So I said, okay. And I found a play that was a William Saroyan play. And I thought that was perfect for us. So we made a date to meet at his apartment, which he shared with someone. The person worked during the day, so we could rehearse in the apartment. And so I walked up 8 flights of stairs in this Greenwich Village apartment. Now it's a very classy part of town, that particular part. But then it was really, you know, people were sticking their heads out of the windows and talking to each other. It was that kind of a place. So anyway, I walked up these 8 stories, and I knocked on the door, and he opened it. And there in front, you know, like 2 feet in front of the door was this table with a big Pepsi Cola bottle and glasses, and he offered me a drink, which I don't remember. To one side there was a little bathroom, and to the next side there was the living room with a couch, and then there was where Jim, his roommate, lived, and then there was another room back there where he lived. Well, so we went to the couch and started to read, and very soon after the read, it absolutely stopped. And we went into his room. I think he kissed me on the couch. Then we went into his room and onto the bed. And then after that, he said, "Will you marry me?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Don't answer so fast." And that was the beginning of our relationship. And it was a 50-year relationship. And, you know, it was, there were wonderful times and terrible times, but that's what life is. But I don't think either of us regretted. I know we didn't. We loved each other till his end. And many, many years later. And then we went to Israel. And we went to Israel because after my parents' death, I don't know whether I told you about it, but they died a year after we were married in a terribly tragic car accident. And because my parents really were the bedrock of our family, they brought all the people in from Vienna in the 40s to escape Hitler. My father and mother sent visas to all their family. So my mother and father were really the bedrock of the family, and they were killed in this automobile accident. And my uncle and aunt became very protective of me. They said, "Well, maybe he married you for your money." That's all I had to hear. First of all, I wasn't terribly rich, but my father left me comfortably endowed, so that I could continue my work and continue my studies, not more than that. So my uncle said he might have married you for your money, and that hurt me so, and hurt Abraham so, that we decided to leave and go to Israel and begin a life there. That's why we left the United States at that point. We just left. And then when I arrived in Israel, Abraham took me to the chamber theater. At that point, I knew not one word of Hebrew except shalom. That's all I knew. And we walked into the theater, and the director of the theater was there, and he looked at me and said, "She is my Juliet." Well, that seemed to be a million miles away from me. You know, I didn't know a word of the language. However, I started to study immediately. I went to an Opan, and I was asked to join the chamber theater, and I played small parts at first. Fortunately, I have a fantastically sensitive ear, so that my vowels are short, as they are in Hebrew, and I don't sound like an American speaking Hebrew, which is great. So, which is great that I don't. And so I did one part after the other. Yerma, there was a little war in between. People were calling me from the States, my relatives, come back. There was the 6-Day War, come back, you know, all sorts of, but we stayed. That wasn't the 6-Day War, that was something else, but never mind. There are always so many little wars. But they called me to come back to the States, which of course I didn't. And Abraham and I lived in Israel, and I joined the theater, and I played many parts. Yerma, by Lorca, an original play by an Israeli author. Abraham played the lead in there. And another play, and Abraham, the second play I did, Abraham decided to become, I was the Princess of the North, and so he became a minister in my retinue, so that if I got mixed up, he would come running to me on stage in character and say, "No, we're not stopping at this point in our journey, my queen. We are going to go there." So I would say, "Oh, thank you." Because one word sounded like another to me, and it made a great difference in the run of the play. So anyway, so it was a fantastic time. It was exciting. I was doing work. Abraham and I were extremely happy. He was doing a lot of writing and radio work as well as stage work and writing plays. And talking about writing plays, when we came back to the States, he wrote 2 plays for me, Mrs. Davidson's Story and Snow People. And I traveled all over the United States with those plays. In colleges, I performed college campuses, in community theaters, in schools. I really had enormously successful experiences with his plays. They were wonderful. They were riveting. They were exciting. They were one-person plays. He directed them. He screamed at me and told me I was talentless. And of course, then when I did what he thought was right for the play, which of course was right for the play, he was delighted and loving and said I was brilliant. But, so that's the way it went. We had a very, very, very loving marriage. The truth is, Abraham was an extremely talented man. When I first met him, all I knew about him was that he was an actor. And he went to the actor's studio. He was an actor from Israel. And he went to the actor's studio. And, but gradually, I got to know him also as an actor. We acted together, scenes. I've told you about the scene that I don't. I told you about that scene, but also he was a writer of great depth. He wrote three beautiful plays, one-person plays that he did for me. And it was a beautiful way that he did it because, I didn't tell you about this, but about 6 years after we were married, after we had come back from our first jaunt in Israel, that was about 2 years, we just talked about that. That was the years that I played Juliet. I gave birth to a beautiful daughter, Tracy, and I loved being a mother. That was wonderful, but one of the things that made me so happy being a mother was that I didn't have to make the rounds anymore. I didn't have to go running around to agents begging to be cast. That doesn't happen now, but that was the way theater was done then. So I could just be quiet with my baby, take her for walks, be with her, and it made me very happy. And Abraham began to write a great deal. Not only to write, but to paint. He was an extraordinary artist with so many talents at his fingertips. I mean, our apartment today is filled with the paintings that he created. But let me get back. So there was a point when in our lives that we decided that we were not going to have an only child. I was an only child, and that was not what our future would be. And so I gave birth to this beautiful another daughter, Willa. And so we were the parents of two adorable little girls. And I didn't have to do the rounds and so forth and so on, but the children were growing up, and life in New York was very, very difficult at that time. In the 70s, the city was not safe. The girls were in a private school, which was right next to our apartment, Walden School, but it was getting very unsafe and extremely expensive. And Abraham's father died in Israel. And so everything was pulling us back to Israel. So when the children were, one was 10 and one was 12, Willow was 10, Tracy was 12, we moved back to Israel and we began our life there for the next 12 years. And Abraham began to write one-person plays for me. And so I came to New York, showed them to an agent, and she said that she could book me in Mrs. Davidson's story. And so I had 30 cities that I went to with Mrs. Davidson's story, and the children were then pretty much independent. They were both in college. And so I was spending more and more time in the United States. Abraham was in Israel and in other places in Europe with his paintings. And so eventually we knew that it was time to leave Israel and come back to the States, which we did in 1985. And he continued to write plays for me and did work in California on screenplays with Milton Katselas. He was enormously talented, enormously charming, a very, very good writer, and a very, very good human being, aware of the world around him. And our family and people who knew him miss him very, very much. Miss his wisdom, miss his laughter, and miss his writings, and of course his love. What inspires me now? Did I tell you? I have two beautiful, wonderful daughters, Tracy and Willa. And I have two great grandsons. They're men. They're adults. They're almost 30. Ian and Daniel, Tracy and Willa. So I have a great family, and they have always had open arms and have helped me at every turn, because now I'm not exactly, 30 anymore. So they've been very generous to me. And I feel well loved, and I love them with all my heart. But nothing really makes sense unless I work. Just to sit, to watch television, which is very interesting, to listen to the news, very depressing, but I have to work. And I bless those writers like Dirk Burroughs and Donald Loftus, who have provided me with beautiful scripts, with parts for me. And that is really what excites me to get up in the morning and think about the roles and eventually learn the lines and rehearse. And that really keeps me alive.
What is your most memorable or profound story from acting that made an impact on you as an actor?
I think that is such a big question, and I know there are many, but this is a dramatic, something that comes into my head immediately. I was in summer stock. Not only was I acting, but in the daytime, we were looking for props for the next show. So we were doing everything. It was a small company, and actors were working in the theater doing the things that we need to do in order for the actors to do something on stage. So we were picking up props, and I was in a truck. And I knew the night I would be playing Amanda in Glass Menagerie. So we were driving in the truck, and I don't remember her name, but let me give her a name. The person who was driving the truck was a terrific woman. Her name was Sandy. She was driving the truck, and someone banged into the back of her truck, and my head went right through the windshield. It cracked the windshield, and I had a bump in my head that was the size of a ball, and Sandy insisted that I go to we find a doctor, because she was afraid that I might have had a concussion. So we did find a doctor in this little town, and I remember going upstairs to him, and he saw me, and I told him what happened, and he came on to me. So I was running around the examining table, running around it, him chasing me, and finally I found the door and left. And that night I played Amanda in Glass Menagerie. But what was so wonderful was that the bump was right over here in the middle of my forehead. So I had a bump as big as a ball in the middle of my forehead. Well, it was well placed. So I took a whole bunch of my hair and made little ringlets across my forehead, and that's the way I played Amanda for the rest of the run. Choo choo to your food.
If you could give one piece of advice to your younger self, what would it be?
Think more positively about yourself. Stop putting yourself down. Think you can do it. I got over that, but I threw so many negative sentences or feelings against myself, and I would have been ahead had I not done that. I would have been happier, certainly.
What is your advice to those who are inspired to get into the arts? Acting, writing?
If it's the only thing you want to do, really the only thing you want to do, then do it with all your heart. Because if it's not, if you have some wavering, if you would rather teach, or maybe be a doctor, or maybe if there are any maybes about what you want to do, then forget about the arts, because they are the most wonderful thing in the world, but the most difficult to achieve. And it may not always be your fault. It may be a series of unlucky breaks, or of no breaks at all. And that may be your history and your struggle. Only if it's the only thing that you want to do, then you have all my good wishes go out to you. But do it only if you can't live without it.
If you could tell the world one thing, what would it be?
Care for one another. Know that there is a person next to you or 1,000,000 miles away who is a human being and needs care and needs love and needs food. Be aware of the world around you.
Hi, Andrew.
Hey, how are you?
Nice to see you.
Same here.
So, could you tell us what made you want to be an actor?
What made me want to be an actor was actually, I feel like I was sidewinded by it because I went to college, which I didn't really want to go to. I was doing it for my mom, and my intention was to be an English teacher or math teacher. Those are my two strongest subjects. And I wound up going and taking a class that you have a throwaway class with your major things, and it was a poetry class. And the assignment was to recite and memorize one of your favorite poems and do it in the class, which I thought was interesting. And my choice was a poem by Robert Frost called The Road Not Taken. And I did the poem, did the assignment. I'm leaving the class, and the teacher, her name was Miss Dornay, she approaches me. She said, Andrew, have you ever thought about acting? I said, no, not at all. She said, but I think you should think about that. You have this. I was like, and I'm trying to get out of the class because I want to go to the cafeteria and get something to eat. And I'm not really thinking about this, but she was so dogmatic about it to the point where she got me in a play. It was a little offbeat play. 3 men in a boat that were stranded. They did it in the gymnasium, the pool. And I was smitten. It was something about the process of doing it. It was something, and I grew up with the arts. My mom in my neighborhood, we had a center where I used to go and hang out during the time she was working that gave you the arts. You were introduced to it. So I knew about them, but I never really thought of myself as an actor or writer or anything like that. But I enjoyed the time that I had there. They had great staff that really talked to I guess, gave the kids something to do and to enhance whatever. So that one time after doing this play, I started venturing into the theater department just to watch. And suddenly I was there more time than I should have been. I was neglecting studies that I should have been doing. I was working in the backstage, so lighting, stage managing. And I couldn't believe this. So I started taking classes that were more in the communications and the theater department. I ultimately left college because I was not doing well academically. And thank God my mom didn't get pissed off and want to cut me up or anything. She understood in her own way that this is something that I wanted to do, and I had a passion for it. I left there because at Adelphi University where I was going, you have a certain type of, I guess, playwrights that they utilize, which was great. I remember one time there was a play called, I think it was called Dames at Sea, and you had to tap. I'm not a dancer, but I was encouraged to do this, and learning the bit of tap that you had to do for the background. The day of the show, they put me on the top of the ship by myself. And I'm like, oh God, I can't mess up. But I can't explain it. It was just, I was in love with theater. I was in love with all that goes into it, makeup and costume. So when I left Adelphi, I sought a place called the Afro-American Studio because I wanted to get a Black perspective. And that's where I really learned my craft. The place had everything you needed. They had a vocal coach, dance. They had two different theaters. I think there was one like an intimate theater space and a larger space. The gentleman that did the sets had a space down in the basement. He was amazing. I mean, the things that he could build. So that's where that's kind of where it segued from there to, because I felt like in college I was trying to really find myself, and I didn't know what the hell I wanted to do. I had an idea. You go for, you want a job. So you want to get a job. You want to do something that you're going to make a living from. And I thought teaching would be that, but it turned out not to be. But I never regretted it. I've had a lot of survival jobs in this business, but I've never regret that turn. And I enjoy it, and I enjoy the arts and stuff at all parts, because when I first started, I wanted to be all over the place. So I started out stage managing. But then you're not getting any gigs because you're doing the background, and I want to be outside. And after a while, I got so good at it, I said, I got to stop doing this because I'll never work at what I really want to do. And so you find your place. Then you find your niche, so to speak, in that as an actor. And that's how it all started.
What was your training as an actor, and what is your process for developing a character?
My training was to explore the character. By that meaning, my teacher, Mr. McClintock, he made us write. You would get a play, but he would make us write an autobiography of that character before the end of the play. So you were writing from birth to the time. So if I came in, and another thing when I started out, I kept getting character roles. I was in my 20s. So I'm getting these characters that are 50 and 60 years old. So I had to learn makeup, how to create and change my face to make the age. But he said, you need to write a character, autobiography, to know who you are in this play. So you're reading the play, you know that the time and the place where it is. So you start back, so your birth date to match up to the age that you are in the play. That helped because now you have a structure of who this person is. And it made us relate to the other characters. Because in the autobiography, you have to include the people that are in the play. If you had a wife, if you had children, how did all this come out? So everything that, all the elements in that particular play, you write this autobiography of this character as he is now. Where did he come from? How did he get here? You're going to play just memorizing lines, know when your cue is come in. It's kind of mundane, but it made sense. Mr. Clintock taught us to do this, and he always said to give 100% to the character. When you develop this character, if they are evil, you got to be that evil person. You cannot put Andrew in with your demeanor. You have to be true to the character. So a combination of making the autobiography, and as well as just finding that character, and rehearsals help tremendously in our business, that you're constantly going through it. You're going through with the other characters, you're going with the other, and you find that chemistry with everything, so it helps you. So the development, I think, mainly is and I still today write an autobiography of a character. I haven't done it in a long time because pandemic shut things down a lot, so haven't been out to really get anything, but things I've done post-pandemic. I did a play that I was playing two different characters. So I literally made a little, not as extensive I did in the beginning. As you get older, you kind of find other ways to put it together in a way that you're not, I don't know, being so, it's very intense because you're getting, when was I born? Where was I born? who was my mother, who was my father, what did they do? So I kind of condensed it just to kind of fit in, but I still today will do an autobiography of the characters, because this play that I was doing, it was two totally different characters. One, it was during the, I want to say, I can't remember, it was a country that was in conflict, there was wars going on, and one of the characters was the father of one of the lead characters, and another was like a neighbor who was watching all this stuff happening in their country and being very, very afraid. So I had to find two different people. And I still, like I said, still today, I do those autobiographies that really help me to create.
What is your most memorable or profound story from acting or theater that made an impact on you as an actor?
I would have to say, I've thought about this as I was coming down, because I had reviewed these questions, and the most memorable, I mean, I have a lot of memorable times, but there's a theater, I don't know if it's still in existence, in Roanoke, Virginia, called Mill Mountain Theater. I auditioned for a play. I believe the play was Fougart's Blood Knot, and I had a great time. While I was in the process, because in Mill Mountain Theater, they had different projects coming up. They had 4 different directors. While I was there getting ready for Blood Knot, I booked 3 other shows in the same place. And which meant at that time, I really was a free spirit. You know, it wasn't like I had a family or a loved one that I had to be back. I could do what I wanted to do. So they had a dormitory for all the actors. They had a great space. So I was living in Roanoke, Virginia for maybe 3 months doing what I loved the most, and that never could happen in New York. You know, you book a show, the show goes down, you're back auditioning. But, and it was I think it was the fact that all of these directors united together. They shared who they brought down, because they did a lot of casting from New York. And they're like, well, he could do this, he could do that, and you didn't have to audition. You just had a script, start rehearsing. That was the most memorable for me, because I got to do 4 different plays, 4 very different plays, to fill out my resume. But the main thing was to do what you love most. And they had a wardrobe department that was out of this. I mean, whatever you wanted was in it, whatever period, it was in there. And my first director, when I got there for Blood Knot, because Blood Knot is 2 brothers in South Africa. It was, I think it was, I can't remember which country it was, but apartheid was very much real. And the 2 brothers were totally opposite. One was darker and one was very fair. He had different fathers, and he was passing. And in that time of apartheid, you don't pass. If they find out, it's all like the South. If someone is passing in the South, and there are repercussions of that, you're not going to get it. And he ran to his brother. The whole story is built around them getting to. They didn't know each other. So when we got there, our director, you know how you do your research? She had all our research. We had folders of information on the country. We had folders of this. We had a dialect coach. I was blown away, because she did everything for us to prepare us to do the best job that we could.
Andrew, could you tell us about your writing? What is your process for writing?
Okay, my writing, first of all, I didn't know I was a writer. I dibble-dabbled at writing. Just being, I guess, an actor, and you write those things together. So it primarily started when I was in my church. My pastor allowed me to have a theater ministry, which really blew my mind. Because in church, you have very specific ministries, and mine was not in the area of spiritual, but he was very giving to his congregation. He knew my pastor knows everyone's name, their names, their children's names, their children's children. So he's very, very, very keened into and what you do, and he knew that I was in theater, so he allowed me to have a theater ministry. So what I did was write little skits for the church, primarily for the Sunday school, and I think through that developed in different events. There was a Black History Month, and we did something there. So I was given this opportunity to do some writing. Now, I didn't think I was very good, but as I kept writing more and more, it got a little better in terms of being specific. Recently, during the pandemic, well, after the pandemic, we had our church needed a fundraiser. They had, when the church had been shut down for years and the boilers weren't working well, and they needed extra money. This is a big building, and I was able to do a fundraiser. I wrote a play called Life, based on a woman and her daughter, conflicts between them. She wanted to go one way, mother wanted this way. But to get to where I really found my voice was when we had the pandemic, and that was in March, I believe. I remember it's March 15th, 2020. We were no longer in person, and I'm living alone with a cat who's very, very precocious. She said, "Don't bother me, just feed me, do this, and we'll be fine." I said, "Great." So I said, "What the hell am I gonna do now? We're on lockdown." And I started to say, "Well, I'm gonna write." And to my surprise, I wrote 4 full one-act plays in detail, much more than I had ever written. I said to my younger self, follow your dream. Take the chance, because you don't know where you're going to go. You only get one life. And if I had spoken to my mom, I think my mom would have been agreeable to say, "Okay, get a job, but you're going to get a job because you're not going to live off of me." I would have done that. But I don't know where my life would have went if I had that conversation with my mom. But here we are. But if I could go back and say, the hell with college, find a job, and find yourself.
What is your advice to those who are inspired to get into the arts, acting or theater or writing?
My advice is to pursue it, but pursue it not just for, I don't say the aftermath of it. I say that because as an actor, and people see a show and they say, "Oh my God, everything looks wonderful, looks so easy," but it's not. There's a lot of work that goes into it. There's a lot of discipline that goes into it. There's a lot of elements that make that. So if you're going to make that commitment, and either writing, theater, whatever art form, you have to be committed to that like any other job. There's tools that you have to have used. There are things but it's a commitment. It's a commitment of time. I thought at one time, and it may still happen, that I would like to open a school for children that want to go into the theater. But I want to instill in them that it's a business. I want to instill in them that you have to incorporate your family. Because I've seen too many kids get into this business, they're used up and they're thrown away and they wind up in therapy. I wanted them to know the work that's required. This is not a game. This is going to be your livelihood. This is going to be what you're going to take on and have a legacy of. So I would say, if you're going to go into this, go into it full throttle. Do the work. Do the study. Make the connections. But don't forget it is a business. And don't sign anything. That's why I want to have parents a part of it. You get an entertainment lawyer. You go through every bit of that contract, the fine and the thing. Because once you sign it, and the stuff that you don't have to read, it's going to be all right. That's the danger. because that's when young children get abused in this business, and you're just lost. So I say do it full-heartedly, do all the work, incorporate your family with it. Don't be out there alone with it, because it can be dangerous for, you may have the talent, and people take that and they'll use you. And once you're not viable for anymore for them, they're going to toss you to the side. So I would say be committed, do the work, incorporate your family with it. Don't be alone in this. And I always think about the commitment to the work, because it's like any other job that you have. If you are a postman, you are a teacher, you are any profession, you're going to give it all your all. You're going to do the job that comes with it and all that entails in it. Do that, because it is something that's going to be your livelihood. It is going to be something that you want to leave as a legacy, and you want to leave a legacy that you're proud of.
If you could tell the world one thing, what would it be?
That's a big loaded question. Tell the world one thing. Be kind to each other. I'm 73 years old. I've seen a lot. And the one thing I've seen too much of is people being unkind to each other. I'm a firm believer of a scripture that says we first love God with all our heart, all our soul, and all our mind. But the second part of that is to love each other as we love ourselves. We're all put here together. We're not one man on an island. We're not here by ourselves. And to be kind to each other, to be helpful to someone, because we all may fall short of some way. We're all going to need help in some way. I would say to the world, just be kind to one another and help each other.
Thank you, Andrew.
You're quite welcome. Thank you.
Hey, Martin.
Hey, how you doing?
Thank you for doing this.
My pleasure.
So, could you take us through what made you want to be an actor?
Well, it's more that I didn't want to do other things, but that were like things that I had. I come from a place and a home that was an abusive home, so my goal was to get out of the home. By the time I was 12, I had been abused by a number of people, and in those days, nobody listened to you, nobody followed up on it. Nowadays, if somebody had done that to one of my kids, I'd be serving time in prison for killing the son of a bitch that did it, but this was a different time. So by the time I was 12, I was pretty much kind of screwed up, and I became very withdrawn, very within myself, and I used to find the only relief I could find was going to the movies. And I would spend the afternoon in the movie watching the movie once, twice, 3 times. And wherever the movie was taking place, that's where I was for those few hours. And then time went by, and I still liked movies. I know I liked certain actors. I didn't understand why I liked them. They just seemed to be doing something different than what everybody else. Marlon Brando was doing something different. I didn't know what, just something different. Montgomery Clift was doing something different. James Dean was doing something different. Years went by. I was what they called a behavioral issue in school. I was getting left back. I was getting in trouble. My parents were coming to school more than I was coming to school to see the principal and all that other stuff. Eventually, my old man told me to quit and get a job, which is what I did, and I began getting all these terrible dead-end jobs. At some point, I took the GED test, and I passed that, and then I went to college, And in college, years later, this is over a period of like 30 years after being 12, I got involved with writing. I was taking what they called a pre-law college sequence at Queens College. And one of the things I was doing was taking a lot of writing workshops, and I won this award 3 times in a row, the Golden Award, whatever it was. And they were offering a class in directing. And I thought the directing would help me with the writing. So I signed up for the class. And when I got there, I found out that we all us director people, had to be in each other's scenes that were being directed. So that meant I would have to act. And I thought, I can't do that. I didn't come here for that. And I was this close to leaving. But for some reason I stayed, and I remember waiting to go on stage for the first scene I was in for one of the other directors. And I remember being in the wings. I remember looking out and seeing the footlights. And I remember thinking to myself, there are a whole bunch of people out there. And then for some reason, it didn't scare me. It made me want to go out and be in front of those people. So when I got my cue and I went out, that was it. That was the feeling that I got being in front of these people, doing what I was doing, which was mostly ad-libbing. And then I was hooked. And then the thought about a law career went out the window, and everything else went out the window. And I was working during the day and going to school at night. And at a certain point, this is getting all mixed up. At a certain point, I lost a very good job that I had, and I got into business for myself. And I had hired 2 or 3 people, so I was able to go to auditions during the day. And then that fell through, and that was about, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 years ago. Now I was running the business by myself, and I didn't have time anymore for acting or writing or anything else. And that's pretty much where I am now. I have a little bit of time, but I'm trying to figure out how to make a living now, because the business that I started way back is almost out of business. So the bad news is it's hard to pay the rent without a business. The good news is it gives me more time to write. So I have to figure out how to make a balance now. But in any case, that's how I came to acting. And at some point in there, I decided to take some classes with, I don't know if you know who Ann Jackson was. You know Eli Wallach?
Yeah.
Well, that's his wife. She had a class, a scene study class at HB Studios. Mm-hmm. So I went to study there for a couple of years. And she was very instrumental in teaching us, all of us, what I think the most important thing about acting is being in the moment, being there. Or somebody once said, being where your feet are. And it was interesting because there were times where something happened on stage that wasn't supposed to happen. And, you know, on stage you can't say cut. Or you could, I mean, but that would be really bad form to do that. So you use whatever it is that happened bad, and you make it. I was doing a scene from Othello, and it's the handkerchief scene where I suspect my wife has given this very precious handkerchief to her lover. She doesn't have a lover. Right? This was put into my head by Iago, and I'm asking her for the handkerchief. I'm trying to set her up for her to have to admit she doesn't have it. So I make like I'm going, I have a salt and sorry wound, lend me thy handkerchief. And she can't. And I'm getting very, very angry, furious. I'm a jealous person as it is. She's much younger than I am. I'm older than she is. And I'm saying, the handkerchief, is it lost? Is it gone? And as I'm saying that, no, that handkerchief did an Egyptian to my mother give. Make it a darling as you would your precious eye. And then as soon as I'm saying that, a potted plant falls over behind me. So instead of just ignoring it, I turn to the plant like I'm furious at the plant. And then I go over and I grab the plant and I pick it up and I slam it down to make it stand up. And it doesn't, it falls over again. So I pick it up again and I slam it down again. And I'm still talking while I'm doing this. And I'm saying, the handkerchief, is it lost? Is it gone? Is it out the way? And it was a great scene. And that's, for me, on stage, those terrible moments are great opportunities to do something really, really special, to really be there. And then it doesn't matter even if you know the script. It's you're there. Emotionally, you're there. And I remember at a certain point she came over to help me with the plant and I said, leave it! Anyway, things like that have happened in theater, and that's what I always found to be terrifying when it starts to happen. But then it's like this moment that you really can't duplicate. It's because it's real. And people know when what's happening on stage is real. Everybody knows you're sitting in a theater. Everybody knows that. They're sitting in a theater seat. And there's a stage, and there are actors, and there's scenery. So we all suspend disbelief. But sometimes it's harder to suspend disbelief than other times because it's like, this kind of sucks what I'm watching now. This is, and you're daydreaming about something else. But if what's happening is real, people react to each other. People react to each other's emotions, real emotions. If you're devastated on stage, likely some people in the audience will be able to feel your devastation. If you're happy, if something makes you smile, they smile. So that ability to be in front of a room full of strangers or an audience full of strangers and be able to touch them and allow them to touch me in a way that was non-sexual, non-abusive, was my way of connecting with human beings without necessarily being able to connect with them on a personal level most of the time. When you come from an abusive thing like that, you lose the one thing that you must never lose in a lifetime. You lose the ability to trust. And once that's gone, it's gone. And you can never trust anybody. I mean, you modify it. You trust where you absolutely have to, but only to a certain degree. You stay alone. You stay alone within yourself because that's the only place you feel safe. So she once said, Ann Jackson, that acting is being private. Being private, I forgot what she said. But it was like exposing yourself on stage, dropping your drawers, which I actually did in a play. And that was very hard to do. And then when I did it, I was glad that I did it. It was very, very liberating. Of course, I don't know how the audience felt about it, but that was part of the play. So the acting, I love the work. I don't like anything about the rest of it. I don't like the bullshit. I don't like the having to schmooze. I don't like any of that stuff. And I'm no good at it because I really don't want to be good at it. But there are certain things that you just have to do if you want to be successful. And I'm not a commercially successful actor, writer. However, whatever monologues you've heard in the workshop, those are actually published short stories of mine that I modified to make into monologues. I don't know if I answered your question, but I just went on and on and on.
You did. What is you touched on this a little bit. What is your process for developing a character?
I never think about it. I don't think about it. I get the script. Well, I haven't done this in a while. So when I'm doing the monologues, I'm essentially just being myself. But I did take pride in, over the years before I stopped doing the acting, which I have stopped, with being able to play different characters. And what I found was, the first thing I had to do was familiarize myself with the script so that I knew what they were looking for. Then figure out if I had it in me. And almost everything that they were looking for, I had in me as a human emotion. Because as a human being, I've experienced Othello's rage. I did A View from the Bridge. Eddie Carbone has this incestuous love for his niece, and he's terribly jealous. I've experienced terrible jealousy. That's would explain some of the relationships that didn't work. So I have that. I have whatever they want. I have it because I'm a human being, and I felt all these things at one point or another. It's just a question of being there with it. So a couple of things would have been more helpful if I had a part in a play or a film where I had to be, let's say, a surgeon. I would have to do some studying on being a surgeon. But the emotions that he or she would be feeling, I have that. So I just have to, how do you hold the scalpel? You know, I mean, how do you do the thing with the mask? With the gloves and the stuff like that. But anybody, any person in the world has felt almost every emotion that there is as a human being. So the thing is, can you find it when you need it? And usually I was able to find it when I needed it. Except I don't do it anymore, so.
What is your most memorable story from theater, stage, or on set? From acting, writing, either one.
I remember one time having lunch or dinner, whatever the hell it was. I was working. I'm usually on the road in those days. So I had stopped to get something at Burger King out in Garden City Park on the island. And it was during the summer. It was a brutally hot day, and I was just thrilled to be in the air conditioning. And I was having my, whatever it was, a chicken sandwich that isn't really chicken. It's just, some composite crap. But I like it, so I don't care. And the restaurant was empty. All of a sudden, some guy comes in. This is in the middle of the summer, in a brutally hot day, in a long woolen overcoat and a woolen stocking cap. And I don't pay too much attention because I'm eating my chicken or whatever it is. And now he's talking to somebody. And I look around to see who he's talking to, and there's nobody there. And he's getting into this heated argument with someone that only he can see. And I'm fascinated by what I'm seeing. And then I realized that's what acting is. Not acting. It wasn't acting like he saw somebody. He saw somebody. Now, true, he was nuts. But as an actor, if you can really see what you're supposed to see and hear what you're supposed to hear, then you're not acting anymore. You're being, it's happening. You're in the moment, you're there, you're where your feet are. And that was my first short story that I sold, was about that guy in the restaurant. So that I found really fascinating. And I don't know where he is now. I hope he's well. Or maybe not. Maybe he's better off not being well. Maybe he's better off seeing these people and arguing with them, because he was really giving the guy hell. Whoever he was talking to, he was really giving him hell. So I would say that. And probably a lot of other things that I don't remember at the moment.
If you could tell your younger self something, if you could give a piece of advice to your younger self, what would it be?
I would tell me to get the hell away from my home even sooner than I did, because that was very, very toxic. I ran away twice, but I had nowhere to go. I was like 12 or 13 or something. So I just ran away. It seemed like a great idea at the time, but then when it got to be nighttime and I had nowhere to go and it was cold out, I had to come back. And I was humiliated when I came back. I was smacked around for running away. So I would have gotten away sooner if I could have. I think I stayed too long. But you know, the thing about an abusive relationship sometimes is, as much as it's toxic, you tend to believe the person abusing you is someone you really need, and you tend to cling to them even more. So it's an unhealthy relationship. And unfortunately, as a kid, if it's a parent, you need them. You really need them, and that's why you're in a bind. That's why you're in a problem. But if it was my younger self, and I would have committed myself more to acting and writing than I did. And I have to say that I'm not successful, not just because the business sucks as far as I'm concerned, but because I never committed myself to it enough. I committed myself to every role I played, to every play that I was in, or every film, or whatever. But I always felt like I had to have a steady job somewhere to pay the rent. And of course, part of this happened. There was a period of time I forgot to even mention. You know, I got married. I had 2 children. I have 2 grown children now. I have 3 grandchildren. So that was something that I did that I'm thrilled that I did. But of course, it didn't leave very much time for acting or anything like that. And that was a period of time before I'm losing track of. That was when I was just working, making a living to support my family. And then when that eventually broke up and the kids grew up, then I went back to the acting thing. So I got a very, very late start.
If you could give a piece of advice to someone who wants to get into the arts, acting or writing, what would you tell them?
I would tell them to figure out what they have in mind to begin with. If you're getting into the acting, which is, I'm more familiar with the acting or the writing. I'm not a sculptor, I'm not an artist. I used to paint and draw when I was a kid. They used to hang my paintings in the halls in the school. But I would say you have to figure out, are you doing this because you want to be like a movie star? Or are you doing this simply because you love the process, the acting itself? If you love just the acting itself, you don't have to be financially independent at a certain point. You can get work as an actor doing all kinds of things. You can be in a little town somewhere and be doing community theater. If it's the acting that you want to do, you can do it. Or you can come to New York and be like one of 5 million actors here, banging their heads against the wall. You can do that also. But if you want to make money, then you have to commit, I think, to a different thing. You have to commit to making contacts, to following up on that, to being what they call a schmoozer. You have to, making contacts, networking, all that kind of stuff is super important. And if you can't do that, or if you're like in my case where you don't want to do that, then you have to realize that the likelihood of becoming a star on Broadway, becoming a star in Hollywood or whatever, is very, very, even with all that, it's very, very, very unlikely. I mean, if you can count maybe 100 big names movie stars now, which I can't do anymore, Well, that's 100 out of how many million people trying to do it? It's infinitesimally small. So if you can get that out of your head and be happy with doing the work, then, go for it. If you're looking for the other thing, I'd say don't do it. Don't do it, because it's not like other businesses. If you want to be an attorney, you have to take the bar exams. You have to go to college, you have to take the bar exams, then you're an attorney. If you want to be a doctor, you have to go to medical school. There are certain tests that you have to take to get your license. An accountant, any of these things. If you want to be a plumber, you have to work in the business for a while as an apprentice, and then you become a mechanic. But in this business, there's no criteria. It's, some people make it without going to, fancy schools and stuff. And some people go to fancy schools and they never make it. So it's in simple terms, it's like, if you're trying to be a movie star or a Broadway star or a TV star or whatever, think it over, rethink it. And I would probably tell that to somebody who 2 months later turns out to be a star. So you don't know. There's no rules.
If you could tell the world one thing, what would it be?
That I don't know. That's a hard one. I can't imagine speaking to the world. If my writing continues to exist after I'm dead, maybe I will be saying something to the world, based on what I wrote or performances that might have been captured. But to put it into a sentence or two, I think I would just tell the world to get your shit together, man. Cut a lot of this shit and just get your shit together, which isn't very helpful. So I'm not about to be able to. I can't think of anything other than that, really.
Hi, Arlene.
Hi.
Thank you for doing this.
No, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. So I am really curious as to what made you want to be an actor.
What made me want to be an actor? Now, I don't know if I knew at the time that it was called acting, but it all started for me as a kid doing Easter speeches at Evergreen Missionary Baptist Church on the west side of Chicago. It was just something about the whole process of picking out your Easter speech, going home, memorizing the lines, which I don't know why I love that, but memorizing the line and then coming back and performing it in front of the congregation and getting the claps. That was my first foray into actually performing, and I like how that felt. So I would say that did it, but it was seeing the film Sounder with Cicely Tyson when I was about, I think, 11 or 12. And it was just, I still cannot even put into words what it was when she came across the screen, and she was just that strong, vibrant, black woman who was just running everything. And then, look cute little Kevin Hooks was in those scenes with her. But it was actually Cicely Tyson. They made me realize that what it was doing was called acting. And it was something. Then from there I was like, yeah, I like doing that. I like performing and presenting. Mine may be a little different than most because I personally, my training was the stage and actually just getting in front of the camera. I had no formal training. I didn't go to a conservatory. I didn't go to a university for the program. But I will say that the high school I went to in Chicago, which was Whitney Young Magnet High School, which was the first magnet high school in Chicago, had a very good performing arts program. And so I was part of the performing arts program. So from there, I took my acting 101, acting 102, acting 3, and acting 4, my freshman through senior year. So the bulk of my training was in high school. And after that, it was the stage. And the process that I personally use, and everybody's processes is totally different. So there's no, to me, there's no one route to get to the character. But for me, once I've found out that I've booked it, whether it's stage or film, and once I get the script, I initially go through, I read the script one full time just to see where I come in at throughout the script, and then just to get a feel of the story and how I fit into the script. Then I read it 2 more times, and then by the 3rd time, I'm trying to find the voice of my character. I do a lot of people watching. I've worked in the airline business. When I first came to New York, I used to drive down to the Lower East Side and just sit in my car and just and people watch. So I get a lot of character development or physicality just from people that I've watched. And a lot of my characters, I try to find myself in them. I think that's what mostly all of my characters. There's a little bit of something about me that I can find in a character, and then if I don't, I actually don't do the role, and that's just me. If it's something that I can't connect with the role, I let it go, and so yeah, that's my process.
What is your most memorable or profound story from acting in theater or film or TV that made the most impact on you as an actor?
I think the most impactful piece that I've done was this play called Love Child by Luther Goins, and it was set in Chicago, so that was a familiar setting for me. And it was done at the Harlem Theater Company that used to be on 150th off of St. Nicholas there, and it was run by James Pringle, and he also directed the piece there. He's also from Chicago. And it was that story. It was a story. It was called Love Child, and it was a story of 4 teenage girls who, it was set, I should say, in a group home for unwed mothers, and the main characters were 4 teenage pregnant girls, and I was the mother. The role that I played was Miss Jones, who was the mother of one of the girls. And it was a story about grit, but it was also a story about heart. And it just wasn't about, oh, they pregnant, they from the ghetto. Luther showed humanity with the girls and also with the mother. It was about a generational of unwed mothers, pregnant, no dads in the house. But it was the way that the writing allowed these characters to be human and for us to fall kind of like these characters. And even Miss Jones, the character that I played, what I really liked her, it was the first character I ever played that I was able to follow the arc and come from this crazy woman who was a drug addict, who herself was a teenage mother, didn't know anything about loving, jail and all of that, but in the end there was a redemptive quality to her, and she had come around, and there was a redemptive quality to all the women that were in that story. So that was like one of my really most impactful stories. 1, because it was set in Chicago. 2, because I could connect with the fact I myself wasn't a teenage mother, but my sisters, my cousins, and I had friends who were teenage mothers, and society had them out as just being pregnant and, blah, blah, blah. But because I knew them personally, I know that this was not their journey and this was not their story, because they're all strong Black women. And that's what, Luther portrayed in that play, Love Child.
If you could give one piece of advice to your younger self, what would it be?
Let's see. I would tell my younger self, Actually, I would tell my older self as well, because I still have not learned the lesson. But I would tell my younger self that it's okay to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is something that I have a problem with. Then, now, it's just something about me being able to let go totally. I don't know, maybe I need counseling to find out why I can't be so vulnerable. But that is the one thing I would tell myself, to be vulnerable, because I think not being vulnerable has held me back a lot. I think it's had a big effect on my acting as well. And the one thing about acting that a person needs is to be vulnerable. So I think I've done myself a disservice by not being vulnerable, especially in this profession that chose me. So yeah, I would tell myself to be vulnerable. I'm trying to tell me to do it now. But I'm still hard-headed. But I think if I would have gotten the memo to myself earlier, I would be better equipped to be vulnerable now. Yeah.
Has that affected you in your personal life? Not just acting, but your personal life in any way?
I think so. I would think so. Because I think being vulnerable, not being vulnerable, keeps a wall up somehow. You know, there's this invisible wall. And I think if you're guarded all the time, then you're not allowing yourself to be totally free. And then that means you're not allowing anybody else to have free range to come in. But then that also could be the reason why I don't allow myself to be vulnerable, because then I feel like I might be losing a sense of control by allowing somebody else to have a say or become a part of. Yeah, I like control. Control and vulnerability. Yeah, not a good match, I don't think. But hey, I'll work on it. It hasn't killed me. But yeah. It has definitely, I definitely think it affects, relationships. Not to the detriment of that I've, ruined relationships with it, but I think if I was a little bit more vulnerable, it would have helped some relationships.
What's your advice to those who are inspired to get into the arts?
Just do it. Just do it. There's never going to be a great time I'm going to wait till I finish going to school. No, just do it. Find that one thing that, whether it's in theater, film, comedy, whether you want to write, do it. Only thing stopping it is you. Hey, don't let you be the thing to get in the way of you. Get out of your own way and do it.
If you could tell the world one thing, what would it be?
I forgot that one. Ooh. I can tell the world one thing. This is being filmed in 2025. So if I can tell the world one thing, and that is, as a black woman, and this is not having to do with the arts or anything, but just as a black woman living in this world, we are not your enemy. We've been the backbone of a lot of movements. We've been the backbone. We are the backbones of our families. We are the connector. Embrace us. We're not your enemy. That's what I want the world to know. Because I think everybody puts us at the bottom because, they're loud, they're aggressive, they're this, they're that. No, we're smart. We're intelligent. Some of us are vulnerable, but we're not your enemy.
Thank you, Arlene.
Thank you.